Are continuing with our project from yesterday. We created a project, we called it UIDatePicker. On our first view controller, we were able to edit or to add in an event. Let me get my keyboard going. So we were able to add in an event. For example, we could add an event, Twitter, right? They're actually here today. And we could put in a time. So here I could put in 2 p.m. here. So we're able to create an event. Here I say Twitter. I click on the return button, right? At that point, it created an event called Twitter. I'm able to go to RSVP that event by clicking on the RSVP button, right? So this was what we got to yesterday. Here we're able to have Twitter get passed from view controller A to view controller B. We were able to pass an event object from view A to view B in the Prepare for Segue. In Prepare for Segue, we were able to pass, let's go back to our Prepare for Segue. And Prepare for Segue was in our create event. In our create event, we had our Prepare for Segue. Right, so in our Prepare for Segue function, it's an override function from the view controller. We said we need access to our detailed view controller. To get to the detailed view controller, we said segue.destination. We typecast it, or we optionally casted it to the detailed view controller. That's what we expect. That's where we go into. And we have access to the detailed view controller now. On our detailed view controller, we have an object called event. We needed to set the event. So this is where we set the event. Here we're saying where we segue to now has its event set successfully. So where we go into the detailed view controller. The detailed view controller needs to get its event set. Why does it need to get its event set? Because we need to update that UI. We need to update the UI of our detailed view controller to have Twitter as the event name, right? Without setting that event, we don't have access to the event name, we don't have access to the event date. So we are able to pass an event to set those two properties. So in our detailed view controller yesterday, we need to have an event here. That event needs to be public. Again, it's public by default. If we do not explicitly put public var, it's public by default. Meaning I could have access to it in my previous view controller. In my previous view controller, I say detailed view controller, that event equal to the event that we created. That's why we were able to get here with an event. And we have an update UI function in our view reload. So our view comes on screen, we call update UI. In update UI, we have access to date on the event. It's an optional. We unwrapped it using a guard. So now we have a date. We spoke about date yesterday as well. So here we have the date, and we use our date formatter, lazy variable. We pass in a date. It returned us a string. So we are able to set the selected date label.text equal to that date string. That's why we were able to get this date format here, right? Using the date formatter that we wrote yesterday. This was the date formatter, and we got introduced to what's known as lazy variables. And lazy variables does not get called when the view comes on screen. It gets called when it's needed or when it got called the first time, right? And again, we're using lazy var because it's more performant, it's more optimized, because this does not get loaded as the class comes on screen. When we need it, that's when it gets created. Any questions so far? Any questions so far about, again, big essential part of this project is passing data from view A to view B. We also got practice with that today. We did a warm-up exercise where we had Swift topics table view, pass the topic from A to B. We really need to be comfortable with that. So again, I would say on the weekend, please practice that again. Create your own data. All of us have a hobby. Create your own data, create your own table view, pass data from A to B. This has to be a part. Coming Friday next week, you have to be able to be comfortable with that because that's part of the assessment. Passing data from A to B. We have to be comfortable with that, right? How do we get access to that destination view controller? We have to typecast. What object are we setting on the destination view controller? Is it a topic? Is it an event? What is it? Is it a book, right? Whatever that detailed view controller needs, that variable needs to be public in order for you to set it in the first view controller. Cool? Any questions? Yes? With that particular project, we passed event from A to B, yes. So we passed, the event that we passed was the event we created here. The name is Twitter. The time is 2 p.m. And then when we said return on the keyboard, it created an event in our, let's go back to where it actually created the event. So as we click on the return key here, text field should return got called, right? Text field should return got called. It updated the event's name with what's in the text field. Anytime the user changes the date picker, the event gets updated with the date the user selected. So our event is always getting updated based on the user's action on the first view controller. And when we're ready to segue, in prepare for segue, what we pass over the event. All right? Very good. Okay, so far we've seen passing data from A to B. Next question, how do we pass data from B to A? This is what we'll be doing today. To conclude our project, the data we want to pass from B to A, when I create my event here and I click on the RSVP to event, if the user wants to go to the event, meaning I say yes to the event, I want my first view to update. How do I pass that data from this second view controller to the first view controller? Because right now, if I click on the switch to turn it on, right, and I click on my submit button doesn't work yet. If I go back to my first event, this RSVP no here should say RSVP yes. Everybody with me? And then the user should be able to go back and say no again, or toggle if they don't want to go to the event anymore. So our user needs to be able to toggle on and off if they're going to that event. Everybody clear with what our objective is? Okay. All right, let's go. Okay, cool. Let's go to our detailed view controller. Did we connect this? I don't think we connected the RSVP changed yet. So let's go to our detailed view controller. All right, open up our assistant editor and make sure you have your storyboard for your second scene. Storyboard, assistant editor. Get some more space going, close my navigation bar, get to my second scene. So make sure we have our second scene visible. And make sure we are editing not this one, click on your scene. Make sure that you're editing the detailed view controller. So make sure you have your scene on your left here, and make sure you have your class detailed view controller. I don't think we've connected, yeah, we haven't connected. We need to connect the RSVP. Did I? Oh, it is connected, sorry. We just haven't done code for it. So if it hasn't been connected for you, make sure you connect it. Ours is connected, but we need to have some code here. The code we're doing here basically is on the event we want to toggle. We have an event, right? We want to toggle the will attend property. So if the user switches on, event should be no. If the user switches off, if the user switches on, event should be yes or true. If the user switches off, the event should toggle to false. So let's do that here. And to get access to the switch, we have the sender property. On sender, we have is on. Right? Great. So now the user is able to update the event based on the switch. So make sure we have our RSVP change. Again, RSVP change, we're in the detailed view controller. We're in the detailed view controller. Everybody in the detailed view controller, correct? We've updated our event will attend property. All good? Okay. Let's now go back to our create event. Let's go back to our create event view controller. I do not need this second view here. Great. So now make sure you're in the create event view controller. And where it says date picker change, we'll create a new IB action on line 77. We will create an IB action on line 77. I'm in the create event view controller. I'm in the create event view controller. I'm outside of date picker change. Okay? Here we'll create an unwind segue action. So unwind segue action. Now we're working on Unwind Segue. When the user clicks on the submit button, we want to unwind back to the previous view controller. Meaning, we want to go back to the previous view controller. Everybody with me? So far, we've done prepare for segue, where you go to a destination view controller. Everybody with me? I go from view A to view B. That's prepare for segue. If I want to go back is unwind segue. So here I'm in the first view controller. That's where I'm going to. Everybody with me? From the second view controller, sorry, I'm going back to the first view controller. That's unwinding. I'm unwinding from the second view controller back to the first view controller. So the data I'm interested in needs to be in the first view controller. This is where we are updating. This is where we need to update our label in the first view controller. Everybody with me? Right? Questions? Questions. We're unwinding from view 2 to view 1. Unwind from view 2 to view 1. We need to write logic in view 1 to update the label. Okay? Go ahead, Juan.
I'm not sure if I downloaded the project, but my assistant isn't showing up on the support board.
Your assistant will come around and help you with that. Thank you so much. Any questions about what we are about to do? We'll explain it, we'll go over it, but it's not as straightforward as prepare for segue, right? Prepare for segue is a little tricky anyway for now. We're beginners, right? But unwind for segue, I'll take it a bit slower because there's a lot happening there, right? Some of us probably read before the what I slacked out yesterday or what was on Canvas. Were we able to read it somewhat, right? Glanced over it. But we'll take it a bit easier here with the pacing as to what Unwind Segue does, okay? But at a high level, what are we trying to do? We're trying to say when I click on my switch, on my second view, everybody, on my second view, I click on the switch to say, yes, I'm going to the event. Any questions about that? Any questions about the switch? So when I click Submit RSVP, I want to create an unwind segue so the view dismisses, it goes to my first view controller and my label updates. What label updates? This label updates. The RSVP no becomes RSVP what? RSVP yes. That's what the unwind segue will help us to do. Okay? Okay? All right. So here we need to create an IB action. We need to create an IB action for the unwind segue. We need to connect the action button from the source view controller to this unwind segue action. So let's go through the comments. We have an unwind segue action we need to create. I'm in the first view controller, right? I'm in the first view controller. Any questions? I'm in the first view controller. I need to create an IB action for my unwind segue. When I click on that submit button on my second view controller, this function gets called. Everybody, okay? So we need to create an IB action for the Unwind Segue. We need to connect the action button from the source view controller, meaning the second view controller, source view controller, meaning our detail view controller, to this Unwind Segue, right? To this particular Unwind Segue that we're about to create. Questions? Okay. So we'll create an IB action. We'll call it updating or update UI from Segue, from update UI from Unwind Segue. It's a function, right? One of the most important parts, or an essential part of setting up an Unwind Segue action, is the parameter. What does the parameter have? This by itself is not going to work. We need to have a parameter of type UI storyboard segue. So our parameter here, segue UI storyboard segue. So it's required to have a parameter of type UI storyboard segue in the Unwind Segue action. So this is required. Why? This is the only way interface builder can recognize an Unwind Segue to connect to. We have to do a connection in storyboard, right? That connection we're making, when we control drag, the only way interface builder will see an Unwind Segue action is by looking out for this parameter here, a parameter of type UI storyboard segue. Okay? Cool. Any questions so far? A lot of notes, right? Any questions so far? Again, this is the first view controller. This is where we come into in the Unwind Segue. So we're unwinding from 2 to 1. 2 back to 1. All right, what do we need? So very similar to Prepare for Segue, we need to get access to that view controller. The view controller we need access to here happens to be the source. So segue.source, right? Before we did segue.destination. In Prepare for Segue, we did segue.destination. Here, we're in the first view controller, so we need the source. Where are you coming from? Where are you coming from? We need that view controller. So we need access to the source destination view. It could go to different views, yes, but there's only one source and one destination on a segue. The segue, that segue property here, only has destination, one destination, and one source. We're only interested here in the source, not the destination, because we are the destination. Okay, everybody? The first view controller is the destination. Working with an Unwind Segue, right? In that function here, we are the destination. Okay? But we need to know who we're coming from. Destination is us right now. I'm in the destination view controller. Okay, but I'm interested in getting to the source. Like, who am I segueing from? Okay, cool. So we need access to the source destination controller. So let's get it. What is the source destination controller called? Detail view controller, right? Thank you very much. So here I'll say detail view controller. And very similar to what we did with prepare for segue, we'll use guardlet. We'll use guardlet here to optionally unwrap it, right? So here, what do we have? We have segue dot, what do we need? Source, right? So here we have segue dot source. And what else do we need? Is that enough? So we need to typecast it, right? So as question mark, to what type? Detail view controller, very good. And here we'll say else, and we'll say return, more on refactoring to fatal error later, right? We only could take so much at a time. Okay, cool. So here we have our detail view controller. Excellent. So we have access to the detail view controller. If we option click on it, it is a detail view controller. Cool? Very good. Any questions so far? Sorry. What is that source? That source is the view controller I am coming from. Okay? Let me verify one thing here on our event. Do we have a did set on our event? Yes, we do. The reason why I'm verifying this, let's walk through this again. So anytime I set my event, what does set event mean? Anytime I set the event, did set gets called. What do I mean by when I say set event? Assigned, right? According to a mini here, anytime I assign a new value to event, did set gets called. Is there any questions about that? It's a property observer. Here we have notes. We said property observer gets called when the property changes, right? When the property changes, we could put more notes here. Changes, meaning when it gets assigned a new value. Matri, when does did set get called? Give me an example of how the value changes. Give me an example, like how does the value change? Like just.
So the original value is 0, and the new value is updated. Well, if the new value is you add 1 to it.
Okay, everybody with that? So when my variable actually gets a new value, meaning if my event equal to whatever 5, and I change event equal to 20, that's a change. Anytime I do one of those changes, did set gets called. Okay? The reason why I'm coming back to did set here, because in our Unwind Segue, we'll say self.event equal to event. What's gonna happen? This set gets called, our UI will get updated. Right? Our UI will get updated. Why? Because our RSVP label will get updated. Our create event title will also get updated. Questions? Okay, let's go back to our IB action for the Unwind Segue. So here we have our event. And on the detail view controller, I don't need this stuff here. On my detail view controller, I have an event. Right? So here we got the event from the source. The source has an event, everybody. Right now, my source has an event. I grab that event, detail view controller, that event, and I set it to my own event. What happens after this? After line 92, what happens? Did set gets called, right? Did set gets called up here. right? This set gets called, it comes in here, and it updates my UI based on what the will attend property is. If will attend is true, RSVP changes to yes. If will attend is false, RSVP gets changed to no. The button title label gets changed to RSVP to event. If it's yes, my button label changes to view event, meaning the user is going to that event, just view the event. Again, it's up to us what we want to put there for the title to reflect that change from the user. Let's go ahead and run the code. Actually, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. Stop. We still need to connect. We still need to connect this here. This is not connected yet. We haven't connected the action. Everybody? We need to actually connect that action in Interface Builder. We need to explicitly connect the action to the update UI from Segue function. Okay? Anybody still coding before we move on to the storyboard? Okay, we'll wait for everybody because this part is very, very important to pay attention to. We have to connect to the Unwind Segue. Yes. Right now on line 87, this is not connected yet. Do you agree? We just wrote that function in. We need to connect it in storyboard. Yes?
So when I was typing, I accidentally put capital and the detail controller and it connected to the other one, like to the actual detail controller. So the reason that I'm trying to understand.
This is an instance. The lowercase here is an instance, right? On the actual detail view controller, you don't have an event. Remember, this is the type. That's what you're asking, Chelsea? Yeah. On the type, this is an error because the type, this is not a type property. Event is an instance property. It only works on the instance of detail view controller. Back to unit 1, right? Instance properties versus type properties. It's a static. It will be static var or whatever, static let. That's a type property. It works on the type. Right here, we need an instance of detail view controller. Yes, that's the one we got from typecasting segue.source. Okay. All right, cool. Everybody finished coding? Andy, you finished? Good. Can we move on to storyboard? We'll give you guys 30 seconds. Yeah, the detail view controller, we need to connect that button, the submit button, to this function we have now. In storyboard. Coming up. We'll do it together. So we go to storyboard, we go to the second view controller, and we control drag from the submit button over to the exit button in the view controller, and it will give us access to this particular function here. That's called update UI from Segue. Yeah. Are we all good? Can we continue? Okay, so let's all go to storyboard. Let's all go to storyboard and really pay attention here. So for Unwind Segue, step 1, we create an IB function, an IB action, right? Very essential, we need to have a segue, a UI storyboard segue parameter, right? So actually, why are we not putting steps here? Step 1, we'll connect it later, we haven't connected it. So steps to create an Unwind Segue. What's Unwind Segue? Unwind Segue is coming. Steps to create an Unwind Segue. Unwind Segue is returning or coming from a source. Returning from a source view controller. VC view controller. Okay, steps to create an Unwind Segue. Step 1, write write an IB action function a UI storyboard segue parameter is required All right. Step 3, typecast and get access to the source view controller instance. Step 4, set up UI accordingly. All right. C event equal to detail view controller dot event set. Did set on event property above. Okay. Step 5, you want to, in storyboard, connect action button to exit icon in source view controller. In storyboard, control drag action button to exit icon in source controller and select example this method. And this method being this method name here. Cool? So step 1, write an IB function as we did on line 94. Step 2, a UI storyboard parameter is required, right? Example, segue, UI storyboard, segue, right? Step 3, typecast, meaning as question mark. Typecast and get access to the source view controller instance, right? As we did on line 96. Step 4, set up UI accordingly. See event equal to down here. On event equal here, we get our did set gets called. It updates the UI. Step 5, which we need to do together. We need to go to storyboard. So in storyboard, we'll control drag from the button, from the action button we have, to the exit icon in the source view controller scene, and select example, this particular method here. So we'll get options of which method we want to select, and we'll select this particular method. That's going to conclude the Unwind Segue actions we have to do. Any questions about step 1 to 4? Because we've done those. We've done those right here. Any questions about step 1 through 4? Yes?
It looks like the UI storyboard segue is required because the way it connects to the actual storyboard.
Yes, because the way Interface Builder looks for function names. If it looks for function names based on the segue parameter. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Any other questions? Still typing? We good? You got the notes in? All right. Let's go to storyboard and make the final connection. Let's go to storyboard. So the scene we're interested in, is where we actually created that connection. Everybody with me? Where we're creating the connection is the second view controller, right? Where we're coming from. Where we're coming from, the source destination, that's where we need to make the connection to our IB action. Everybody with me? So make sure we have access to our second view controller, our detailed view controller here. We'll option click, we'll option drag from submit RSVP button. Do we all have the submit RSVP button? Andy, you have the submit RSVP button? So option drag from the submit RSVP button. Control drag. Control drag from the submit RSVP button up to where you see that last dot here is the exit dot. Do we see the last dot here? We have 3 dots, right? View controller, file, and we have exit. Do we see the exit icon? At this point, if we did everything correctly, we should now see the function we just created. Do we see the function we just created? Do we see update UI from Unwind Segue? I'm not going to continue unless everybody acknowledges that they do see that function.
Yes.
Everybody sees it, right? Excellent. At this point, we click on it to connect it. The only reason we see that is because of that segue parameter. That's the only way we're able to see it. Okay? At this point, click on it. Click on it. It's connected. Everybody? All right.
Wait, so anything that you connected out will bring you back to the
Yes. So Chelsea's question was, if, for example, we had a next view controller that we had an IB action in, that's where we go to. So any view controller that you have that IB action in, that's where you go to. Very good. In our case, we have the IB action in our first view controller. So when we click on Submit RSVP, we unwind back, right? Or rewind, right? Back to that view controller. Everybody? Cool? So prepare goes forward, unwind goes back. Any questions about those two? Yes?
Yeah, but controller, all actions
It will have empty circle. That's fine. But we've connected it already. We connected it right here in the exit button. Okay? Okay. So at this point, let's run our application. Let's run our application and see if everything works as advertised. So we have our application. We'll create an event here. I'll say lunch. I'll press return. I'll put in 1:30. I'll say RSVP to event. So prepare for segue works. It passed my event over. My event name is lunch. The time is 1:30, right? Now the user says, do they want to go or not go? It's lunch, right? Why not? We are going. So the user says, yes, I want to go. So they click it. They click the switch button on, right? Then user is saying submit RSVP. They click on submit RSVP. It unwinds back to the first view controller. It unwinds back to the first view controller. What is our label saying now? RSVP yes. So the RSVP label did get updated. Our button title also got updated. Yes, go ahead.
So these people have to have that like three buttons sent from another view, and that is able to press and like set it to like a different.
Yes, you could do anything you want. You have the data. It depends on what you want to do with your UI. Now let's try to change it to no. Let's go back again to our second view controller. Turn the switch off. So we are not going to lunch for some reason, right? And we click on submit RSVP. What should my label read? RSVP no, correct? So if I click on submit RSVP, label reads RSVP no. So our Unwind Segue works correctly. Everybody with me? So we're able to pass data back to our first view controller through the unwind action that we created. Any questions about that? Any questions about that? Adan?
I
Any questions about that? Eric?
I think that where I don't know where the sending back the
Okay, let's put a breakpoint and see what's happening. So let's walk through what's happening with a breakpoint. So in our create event view controller, let's put a breakpoint right into our function here. So everybody, put a breakpoint in update UI from Unwind Segue. Put a breakpoint in update UI from Unwind Segue. Put a breakpoint in your update UI from Unwind Segue function. Everybody has a breakpoint there? Bring up your app, go to the detail view controller, click on the switch button, either way, on or off. Click on the submit RSVP button. When we click on the RSVP button, what gets called? My IB action gets called, Eric, right? We connected it. We physically connected the submit button to the exit. So that exit button we have in the view controller, it gets called, it calls that function, and our function gets called. Everybody has a breakpoint here, right? So this is what happens. So my update function gets called. We get access to the detail view controller. We get access to the event from the detail view controller, meaning the event from view B. We get access to event from view B, and we update event in A. Now, we update event in view A. What happens after this? After this line, what happens? What happens when my event gets set? What happens? What gets called? Did set, right? According to Shania, did set gets called. So let's go up to did set. Keep your breakpoint here. Let's go up to did set. Put a breakpoint right at line 21 in my case. Put a breakpoint right at 21. Click on continue running code. Click on continue executing code here. Click on it. Right? Where are we now? Where's the breakpoint now? Luba, where is the breakpoint? It's in the RSVP, right? It's in the did set function there, closure, right? Everybody, did your breakpoint go into our event property? Lilia? So put a breakpoint in, run your application again, or you don't have to run the application, but make sure you put a breakpoint in the event property. Where it says var event here, put a breakpoint. Okay. Greg, did you get a breakpoint in your did set? Greg? Oh, sorry. I'm looking at your notes in Greg. Kelby.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Cool. So this is what happens. My event gets set. My event gets set here. And what did we say about did set? Anytime you change the event, did set gets called. So did set gets called here. And our UI will update. Our UI has to update now because we have the code for it. We're saying if the user is going to the event, change RSVP to yes on the first view controller. If I am going to the event, change RSVP to yes. If I'm not going to the event, change RSVP to no. Okay? Everybody? Any questions? Any questions? Eric? Any questions about that? Adan, go ahead.
That bullet time is not already set to true.
I'm sorry, say that again.
That bullet time, what is that already set to
Event will attend.
That bullet time is on
Line 24. It depends on what the user selects at this point, right? Initially, when we start off, right, we created an event here and we set it to false. In the beginning, it's false, right, when we run the app. But after that, we toggle it in the second view controller. Okay? Let's do this one more time. Any questions with the flow of the code, like what's happening? Brendan, you want to explain to us the flow of Unwind? What does Unwind do? The way we have it set up, what does it do? Walk us through it. Project.
Priority device storyboard segue. Here we are accessing the destination. After that, we're accessing the destination for the segue, for the source, not the destination.
Yeah, that's a constant,
Okay, so
but we access the event on it.
we have to skip that
We set our own event on the view controller. What happens next after this?
this section is called.
So after this, so after event is set above, after event is set here, did set on the event property gets called, and the UI is updated. UI is user interface, right? How many UI elements gets updated? How many UI elements do we have here? How many UI elements gets updated here? 2, right? What are they? Okay, so UI elements are the RSVP label and what? And the create event button title, right? And the RSVP label text. So UI elements are UI elements that gets updated are the RSVP labels text and the create event buttons title label, right? So I set my event, did set gets called, and again, did set gets called above where we have our did set explicitly, that gets called, and we have an if and else. If true, set RSVP to yes. If false, set RSVP to no. Okay? Yulia, any questions? Right? So that's what Unwind Segue does. Gets data from our previous view controller to our current view controller. Right? Going back. Prepare for segue goes forward. Unwind for segue returns. Let's run the app one more time. Yes. Can I what? Yeah, sure, you could type. We're just gonna run this. I'm sorry? One sec. Antonio is gonna come to you. Okay, cool. So let's create an event here. Double check Tanya's computer. So I'm creating an event that we're all gonna attend. No, we're not? We are coming to it, right?
Oh my God, oh my God.
Mel is excited about this event. Either you did, okay, I give you guys 2 options. Either you do the assessment next Friday, or either one, whichever one you choose. I'm gonna make an exception here.
I love haggling.
You what?
I love haggling.
You love haggling? Yeah. All right. So we create an event here, RSVP. Everybody's going, right? Either that or the assessment. Either or. Right? Mel says she's going to attend. Let's see if it updates. So I'll click on Submit RSVP. Right? I come in here. It says RSVP yes, right? According to what Mel said. Yulia, question? Right? So Yulia is into the bike ride. 112 miles. 4 a.m., right? 4 a.m. Cool? Yes, sir.
Do a ban based on the action that just,
So when I click on View Event, Prepare for Segue just passes the data, the current event, over to the second view controller. If I change my RSVP, If I change my RSVP here and I submit, it updates my label. Okay? So in that particular project, we saw both prepare for segue going forward, right, from view A to view B, and we saw unwind getting data from view B to view A. Any questions before we stop lecture? Any questions? You have a question? Say that again? Well, that particular lecture, we are done unless you have any other questions, right? Our app is concluded, right? And I could show you guys, let's see how to view the app in dark mode. To view your app in dark mode, right? You go to settings. So to go to settings, I'm in my application. If I swipe up from the bottom of the device, the simulator, if I swipe up from the bottom of the simulator, I swipe up, I get to the home screen. Everybody at the home screen? I'm in my application. I click on the bottom black area of the frame of the device. I click on the bottom black bezel of the device. I click on the bottom black bezel of the device. I click up. I get to the home screen. I go to settings. I navigate over to the first screen here by swiping left. I get to the settings page, to the settings app. I click on the settings app. I go down to where it says developer. In settings, I go down to where it says developer. Do we see developer? I click on developer. Do we see where it says dock appearance? I click on dock appearance. And look at that, we got dark mode. Beautiful things, right? And we swipe up, we go to our application and see how it renders in dark mode. Still looks good in dark mode, right? I go to my event, still looks good in dark mode here. I could see all my labels, right? Click on submit. Great. Okay, so we'll end lecture here. Thank you.